let's start with Brian Flores, who all season, not just this year, but last year, I've been really high on as a coach. I think there's no argument. I can make the case he's one of the most qualified coaches, if not, for sure, top 2, top 3, right now available in the open market for an NFL job. And Brian Flores has a text interaction with Bill Belichick, allegedly, where Bill Belichick congratulates him on the job, believing that he's talking to Brian Daboll.
Yeah.
Now, to give you full context, the Giants hired the number 2 man in Buffalo from that organization, Joe Sheen, who is now the GM. Now, it only makes sense that Joe Sheen likely would bring Brian Daboll to New York.
And we talked about that.
And now we're going to get into the real problem here. And there are 2 legitimate concerns I have with the NFL right now. The first one is you kind of got caught.
Yeah.
It's so blatantly obvious right now, but it's not pure maliciousness. And hear me out. What this is another example, but this time a high-profile coach. Another example of why the Rooney Rule does more harm than good.
Yeah.
I have to interview a black minority coach, even though I know I want Brian Daboll. What the hell does that do for the coach?
It's the whole
That's
situation.
not fair.
No, it's not. It's not.
In practice, that is one of the most disrespectful things I've ever seen. And I've worked in corporate and I've worked in startup land for like 8 years now. You don't do that. That's not a solution. You want diversity? Your leadership at the top pushes for it. Mm-hmm. You go out and hire women. You go out and hire minorities. You know why? Not because you have to or because, we feel. No. You hire them, 1, because they're qualified, and 2, they bring a unique, different perspective to your building. A perspective you don't have. And that is the problem with NFL ownership right now. And that is a big problem. And I don't just want to hear, quote unquote, the NFL is racist. I think it has racist practices, but it comes from stupid, harmful, quote unquote, laws, if I may use that this morning. Brian Flores, another victim of, quote unquote, the Rooney Rule. Guys, before Mike Tomlin ever showed up in the NFL and won a Super Bowl, there had only been 5 or 6 NFL black head coaches hired.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, I could make the argument that, the league is 60, 70, 80% black. So all these guys are playing during their prime years. They're not assistants, and they're not learning the game from a different perspective. Because coaching is totally different than playing. And I think the one supremely successful coach we've seen who's played at an elite level and coached is Mike Ditka. Maybe Art Shell, but guys, a handful of guys. But anyways, beyond the point. Brian Flores yesterday, and Jeff, I would appreciate you a little bit to go more into this.
Okay.
But Brian Flores put himself in a position where he may never get another NFL job.
He did.
All just to expose the clear issue, not only with the NFL, but with this rule in and of itself. There is a black GM in Minnesota right now. Has he contacted Brian Flores? Ryan Poles. Has he contacted Brian Flores? Why is he hiring the DC out of Indianapolis, who is white? I just want these questions answered because before we go on a spree of it's racist, there are multiple black GMs in the NFL. And there are 2 current right now that have open vacancies. And I want to focus, obviously, on the one in Minnesota. Now, if you told me I had my selection between Brian Leftwich, Brian Flores, and Jim Harbaugh, that's a tough decision for me. I think Leftwich is young. I think he has a great future. Yeah. I already know what Flores can do with an average roster. And there's Jim Harbaugh, who has hyper success. That's a tough decision. And if they go with Harbaugh, I'm not going to go to Minnesota with a picket fork and say racism. I'm not. And that is the fundamental problem with the Rooney Rule, is we're interviewing minority coaches, and it undermines their hard work. All of the effort and the hard work they've put in to get to the point where they're at, like a Deuce Staley, like a Aaron Glenn.
Right.
I can name 6, 7, 8 minority coaches off the top of my head that are assistants or coordinators right now that will likely get an NFL job in the next 2 to 3 years. It does not matter, though, because I have to interview them. Is Aaron Glenn just all talk right now? Or is he actually being considered for jobs?
I don't know.
And again, if I'm a GM, I can only give you my perspective this morning. So excuse me, I am not black. I'm not even white. I can only give you my perspective this morning, which is if I am a GM, there are 5 candidates right now in the open market, and I'll exclude Jim Harbaugh, that I'm going for. Kellen Moore, Brian Daboll, but he just got swooped up. Byron Leftwich.
Yep.
Aaron Glenn. I've witnessed him in Detroit. Pretty damn good. Brian Flores. And Eric Bieniemy. 4 of the 5 I just gave you are black coaches.
So why the hell?
And it drives me nuts because when the Lions had a vacancy, God bless you, Dan Campbell, but I wanted Bieniemy here.
I did too.
And I think that was the talk of the town at the time.
It was, yeah.
But I just gave you my list. Forget Harbaugh, forget Daboll. Obviously, Daboll's already taken. Don't tell me the Giants are racist. They're not. They knew who they wanted. There is no problem with knowing who you want and hiring them and then getting upset because I have to interview someone else. That is the problem with the Rooney Rule, is it sets up minority coaches actually for failure. It does more harm than foul. Oh, you get compensatory picks for hiring a minority coach? Really? I have to incentivize teams to hire black coaches? Why? I gave you my list. I gave you my top 5. One of them is white. That's just my perspective, though. The hell does that matter this morning, right? Because Brian Flores doesn't have a job, neither does Eric Bieniemy.
Neither does Byron.
Well, they interview bad. Okay, fine. To be honest with you, if Eric Bieniemy was sitting in front of me and I was a GM and I interviewed him and you gave me my options and he had a bad interview, I wouldn't consider him. Yeah, I wouldn't. Sorry. That's welcome to life. You ever had a bad interview at a job? Did you get that job?
Have you seen Nick Sirianni's press conferences this year? Like, how was he in the interview
I get
room?
it.
How was he in the interview
Who knows? Maybe he interviews amazingly, but he's just a horrible public speaker, honestly. Like, you don't know. It's a joke.
Yeah.
But I could also say, well, he made the playoffs. Like, I can't talk crap even though I want to about him.
But I'm saying just hiring Nick Sirianni. Like, this is how it works. You know what I mean?
I get it. I really think the Rooney Rule is the core fundamental problem here. And I hope out of all of this, not only I hope Brian Flores isn't scapegoated. I hope he's praised. And number 2, I hope we get rid of the Rooney Rule. It is, I don't want to say it's racist in practice. There has to be a better word for this. I think it's more harmful in the work environment in terms of practice than it is helpful. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And Jeff, you brought it up earlier, so I do want to hear what you're going to say about Brian Flores, but he's essentially giving himself up for something I think we've all known for the longest time, which is, they're just interviewing him to check a box. And you may not agree with that, but that's not the team's fault. That is the Rooney Rule.
100%.
Jeff?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And we talked about Brian Flores. Obviously, out of all the coaches, he's the most qualified. We've talked how high we were on Brian Flores, and now looking back, and Brian Flores understands now he still has a chance. Obviously, Jim Harbaugh's now the coach of Minnesota, but there was other opportunities. Dolphins fired him after 2 winning seasons, which is absolutely ridiculous. And for Brian Flores to say that about the Giants, what he said about the Dolphins, and them paying him $100,000 to lose every single game or per game, and incentivizing him to lose games, which is absolutely ridiculous. But the Denver Broncos accusation about John Elway, those guys being looked like they drank the previous night. I mean, this stuff is all coming out, and I'm just honestly, I give Brian Flores all my respect, because we talked about this before the show. He's essentially throwing away any opportunity he has to be a future head coach. I mean, maybe he doesn't, but if you're looking at it straight up and all the storylines and all what's about to come, it's going to hurt his chances. And for him to come out and do this and go out on a limb. And listen, the Bill Belichick text, I mean, I'm not going to get – it's big picture to me. There's some instances that we can argue, but in terms of what he has to say and what the point Brian Flores is making, I absolutely agree. I don't think the NFL itself is racist, but there is systematic racism in the NFL in terms of ownership, like example, the Rooney Rule, and how you have to incentivize hiring a minority candidate, even though there's plenty of qualified minority candidates. It's sad. And with the Giants, I'm not surprised. Like we talked about this. If you get hired to be your GM, and when the Giants originally hired Joe, I sat up here and said, well, he's probably going to bring his guy from Buffalo. Because if you're Joe and you understand there's a chance I may not have a job in 5 years, I would hope you would go with your guy to go down with. I'm not going to hire someone I'm maybe not as sure about and then get fired. I'd rather get fired with Brian Dable than anybody else. So I understand the Giants' point of view. But for Brian Flores to come out, I mean, it takes balls, man. And that's what I got to praise. I have no issue with the overall message he's trying to send about how there's things that need to be exposed in the NFL that maybe too many people turn a blind eye to. But the Rooney Rule, I actually, you hammered it right on the head. I think it does more harm than good. And that's not about, the Rooney Rule itself. It just means, we talk about it. Eric Bieniemy, that was who I wanted as the Lions head coach. Obviously, it didn't work out that way, but look at all the qualified candidates. You can name Byron Leftwich, he started to already be the head coach in Jacksonville. You have Eric Bieniemy, who obviously hasn't had a job yet, but he'll most likely take over for Andy Reid. There is plenty of qualified candidates in the league. So to have a Rooney Rule and still not have minority candidates get hired, it says maybe it's about who you know. I think that's the reality of it. And that's all life. That's not just the NFL. It's always who you know, who you're comfortable with.
Let's look at Brian Flores' exit in Miami. Okay?
Oh, God.
Before the reports, right? He did not disagree with the GM, the owner, and he didn't like the quarterback. Yeah, that's a recipe for failure, if you ask me. But he had two straight winning seasons. I don't think this is a coaching issue. Again, he's a qualified coach.
Yeah, hell of a coach.
But here we are, the owner. And again, I'm telling you guys now, if it comes out that this is true, and Stephen Ross was offering $100,000 per loss, he should be forced to sell the team the same way
that's ridiculous.
The LA Clippers owner was forced to sell. And I'm not joking now. You sell that franchise. The second I find out that you, behind the scenes, are hurting the integrity of the game,
and not only that,
you can get the hell out.
You're paying a minority coach who already, it's a hard time for the minority coaches to get head coaching jobs in the NFL. You're paying him to lose.
So what happens if Brian Flores goes 2-14 that year?
And
what happens? He gets fired.
Probably. He does.
He's going to get another job? Flores is going to get another job pre this lawsuit, because God knows what's going to happen now, because he had 2 winning seasons in Miami with half a quarterback. That's why. And the defense was legit.
It was.
That's why he would get another job. Steve, he should be really forced to sell the team. He really should. If it is true, and again, you don't know how this legally will play out, but if there's any truth in it, and I have to believe with this situation there is,
definitely,
he should be forced to sell the team.
Imagine if, for example, the Fords did that.
If the Fords came out and said, we're going to pay our coach to lose games, you want to talk, I would have a field day with them.
Yeah.
And I would be one of those people trying to get them to sell the team. That is unacceptable. Unacceptable. People pay their hard-earned money to buy those jerseys, to show up to your games. They invest hours of their day to watch it on TV.
You're prepping all week.
To make you money.
I mean, what are you doing?
They support you throughout the week, social media, interactions, giveaways. They do all that for you to lose games on purpose? No. Oh, man, I'm done with that. That is so embarrassing. What a scandal. It is beyond anything I've seen in the NFL before.
Yeah,
it really is. And look, for Brian Flores, big shout out to him. He basically not only put his NFL career in jeopardy, but he basically, it's done. Or at least I think it is. But again, you want diversity, you want change, you want people of all different colors to be, inside of a working, good environment. You know how that starts? At the top. Mm-hmm. And it starts not only with ownership. That's a part of it. It's a big part of it.
Yeah.
But it takes that cavalier president, VP, GM, PR.
Like the Bucs
It takes
have.
that whole staff up there, that whole executive team, to say we are going to push the NFL in this direction. And not because we have to or because public pressure. I could give a rat's ass about the public. I'm going to go out and interview everybody. And I'm going to make sure that I'm going to find the best women candidates, the best black candidates, the best this, the best that. That is how you do it.
Yeah. And then,
Not because you have to.
right.
There's a big difference. And yeah, when people bring up, well, Jim Caldwell doesn't have a job.
That's a whole other conversation.
We'll get to that at 9:13. He doesn't have a job for obvious reasons, not because of his skin color. Okay? If again, I was honest with you in my list of 5 coaches I would hire. 4 of them were black.
It ain't about that.
I would never even give Jim Caldwell a freaking courtesy call. I would never consider him as the head coach for my franchise. Never. Never. Is that racist? No.
It's a pick.
Not my kind of coach.
Yeah.
I know his ceiling. Not interested in it. Fair? Good. We got to go to break.
Fair.